I'm Lita. Standing in the middle of what was once my great-grandmother's library, I stared at the 217 empty shelves. The room smelled faintly of vanilla, a poor substitute for the rich scents of paper, leather, and beeswax polish that used to fill it. My 10-year-old daughter, Luna, was in the car, probably still finishing her snack. I told her to wait while I quickly grabbed something. But there was nothing left to grab. My parents had sold every single book that my great-grandmother, Amelia, had left for Luna. They'd sold them for $165,000 and used the money to build a fancy home theater for my sister Stella's kids. Surround sound, plush recliners, and a popcorn machine shaped like a rocket. And what I did in the next 9 days, without raising my voice once, cost my parents the house they'd lived in for 30 years. It all started with Amelia. She was the first woman in our family to go to college, graduating from Stanford in 1960 with a degree in literature. She was a true book lover, inheriting a small fortune from her father's antique business and spending the next 30 years amassing a collection of rare children's books. First editions with beautiful illustrations, signed copies, and even some handwritten letters from famous authors. In 2005, at the age of 78, Amelia established the Amelia Heritage Library Foundation, a tax-exempt organization registered with the state. The books were placed on a permanent loan in our family home, and in return, the house received a conditional tax exemption, saving about $28,000 a year in property taxes. The condition was simple. The books had to stay in the house, unsold, and be passed down to the next direct line descendant. 2 years before she died, Amelia added a final amendment to the foundation's deed. She named Luna as the sole beneficiary. Luna was only 6 at the time. Amelia sat her in the old oak reading chair by the window, opened a red leather copy of Alice in Wonderland, and said, "These are yours now, my dear." On the inside front cover of every book was Amelia's bookplate, hand, engraved with a line in her handwriting. "For Luna, who will keep them safe." Luna made it a ritual to touch that line every time she opened a book. My mother, Linda, had been eyeing the book collection for over a year. It began with a comment at Christmas dinner. "Those books are just taking up space in that old room," she'd said, while Luna sat across the table, quietly sipping her juice. Luna looked up, held my mother's gaze for a moment, then went back to her drink without a word. She was already wise beyond her years. After that, the comments came more frequently. "Lita, have you thought about what to do with those old books? Stella's boys could use that room for a playroom. Your father's back isn't getting any better, and the stairs to the library are a hassle." I always gave the same answer. "They're not mine, Mom. They're on permanent loan to Luna." And my mother would give me that tight, lipped smile, the one that meant she'd heard me, but wasn't going to listen. I later realized that my mother's obsession with the books wasn't about the money. It was about Amelia. Years ago, Amelia had rewritten her will, skipping my mother and father and leaving the estate, the house, and the library directly to me and then to Luna. My mother had married into the family at 20, pregnant and scared. She'd raised 2 daughters in that house, hosted countless family gatherings, and Amelia's will was a silent rebuke, a wound that never healed. 3 months before our family camping trip, I noticed a post on a rare book forum. Someone was asking about a dealer in Los Angeles for early 20th century children's literature. I recognized the screen name as my brother-in-law, Tom. I thought it was a coincidence. That was my first mistake. Every Saturday, I'd drive Luna from our apartment in San Francisco to the family house. It was a 35-minute drive. Luna had her routine. She'd walk straight into the library, go to the second shelf on the east wall where the Alice in Wonderland book was kept. She'd pick it up with both hands, carry it to the reading chair, and sit down. Her feet would dangle off the floor, and she'd trace Amelia's handwriting before starting to read. One afternoon, she told me the book smelled like the forest after a rain. I explained it was probably the old paper and binding glue. She said she preferred her version, and I told her that was fair. The week before our camping trip, Amelia's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, "The books are Luna's birthright. Don't let anyone forget." I thought about calling my mother, telling her about the forum post and the measuring tape Tom had been using around the library. But I didn't. I told myself it was professional restraint, but it was really cowardice. The Whitfield Research Library, where I worked as a head archivist, had an annual 9-day staff retreat at a camp near Lake Tahoe. This year, I brought Luna. She packed some paperbacks, a sketchbook, and a set of colored pencils. She never took any of the rare books with her. Amelia had taught her well about stewardship. My mother offered to look after the house while we were gone. "I'll water the plants, get the mail, and make sure the heater works," she said. I thanked her and thought nothing of it. The night we left, she texted, "Have fun, dear. I've got things under control." Something about that message bothered me, but I told myself I was overthinking it. We had a great time at the camp, but after 5 days, Luna had finished all her paperbacks and started sketching the birds she saw by the lake. On the 7th night, as she lay in her sleeping bag with the flashlight on, she said, "Mom, I think Gran would have loved this lake." I cried into my pillow after she fell asleep. When we drove home, I told Luna we'd stop at the family house so she could pick up her Alice in Wonderland for bedtime reading. She just nodded, focused on her sketch of a swan. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on and the mail was piled up against the door. My parents' car wasn't there. I texted my mother and father, but there was no response. I used the spare key hidden under a flower pot, a spot Amelia had chosen years ago. The house was unusually clean. There were fresh vacuum tracks in the hallway, and a vanilla-scented candle was burning in the kitchen. I knew my mother only lit that candle when she was trying to cover up a smell. I walked towards the library. I counted the steps. I'd been doing it since I was a child. The library door was open, and the overhead light was on, something Amelia had always forbidden. Inside, the room smelled of dust and vanilla. The shelves were empty. I counted them, 217 slots, all bare. There were faint outlines where the books had once stood. On the reading chair, there was a folded invoice. It was from a rare book dealer in Los Angeles. The total was $165,000, and the seller was my father, John. I heard Luna's footsteps behind me. She looked past me at the shelves, her eyes wide. I stepped in front of her. "Honey, go back to the car, please." She didn't move. Her eyes found the spot where the Alice in Wonderland book used to be. Then she turned and walked away, without a word. My parents came home later that evening, carrying shopping bags and a bottle of wine. They were smiling, unaware of what I'd discovered. "Mom, where are the books?" I asked. My mother set down the bags and said, "Oh, Lita, they were just collecting dust. Tom found a great dealer in LA. We did everyone a favor. Stella's boys are going to love their new home theater." My father added, "Those books weren't doing anyone any good just sitting there." I looked at them, my hands shaking with anger. But I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Thank you for dinner," and took Luna home. That night, after Luna fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a folder that contained the foundation's deed. I'd forgotten about it for years. There was a clause in the deed that would change everything. It stated that any unauthorized disposition of the collection would trigger a recapture event, resulting in full back tax assessment for all years of conditional exemption, plus a 75% penalty. I called Amelia's old friend and the foundation's chair, Helen. She didn't waste any time. She calculated that my parents owed the IRS approximately $380,000 in back taxes, interest, and penalties. On top of that, the house would lose its conditional tax exemption, and the town would assess the property at full market value, an additional $28,000 a year. The next morning, I called the rare book dealer. I explained that the books were on permanent loan from the foundation and that I was formally requesting their return. The dealer, Mr. Thompson, asked to see the deed. I told him I'd be in LA that evening with the original. I drove to LA with Luna. On the way, she asked me what clawback meant. I explained it was when something went back to its rightful owner. She then asked why I hadn't told Grandma about the foundation before she sold the books. I admitted it was because I was afraid of a confrontation. She told me that wasn't very smart, and for the first time, I agreed with her. When we arrived at Mr. Thompson's shop, he showed us the books. Luna found her Alice in Wonderland right away. She opened it to a page where she'd made a small pencil mark years ago and said, "Mom, my mark is still here." Mr. Thompson said he'd noticed it and left it. I showed Mr. Thompson the deed. He read it carefully and then said, "I purchased property that was not legally for sale." He agreed to hold the books for 21 days until I could get the necessary paperwork from the IRS. Over the next few days, I worked with Helen and Amelia's old lawyer, Mr. Harris, to prepare the necessary documents. We sent cease and desist letters to my parents, filed the appropriate forms with the IRS, and notified the state tax department. Stella was throwing a home theater unveiling party the following Saturday. I decided that was the perfect place to make my stand. I told Luna what I was going to do and asked if she wanted to come. She said Cordelia would have come, referring to Amelia. I put on the pearls Amelia had given me when I was 18, and Luna said I looked like her. On the day of the party, we arrived at Stella's house. There were cars in the driveway, and streamers were hanging from the mailbox. Inside, there were guests everywhere, and the home theater looked impressive. Nathan, the lawyer, arrived with a briefcase full of copies of the deed. When we walked in, my mother's face paled when she saw me and the pearls. "Lita, please don't do this here," she said. I gathered everyone in the living room and said, 11 days ago, my parents sold a rare book collection that belonged to my daughter, Luna. They sold it for $165,000 and used the money to build this home theater. But these books were on permanent loan from a tax-exempt foundation, and by selling them, my parents have triggered a recapture event. I read the relevant parts of the deed aloud, explaining the back, taxes, penalties, and the loss of the house's tax exemption. My mother's coffee mug slipped from her hand and fell to the floor. She stared at me in disbelief. My sister Stella tried to defend my parents, but Luna spoke up. "Aunt Stella, you didn't buy this theater. My books did." The room fell silent. I then told my parents that they owed approximately $380,000 in back taxes and penalties, and that they'd have to sell the house to pay for it. I offered to help with the logistics if they wanted, but it was up to them. 21 days later, the books were shipped back to the family house. Luna placed each book back on the shelves herself. The room once again smelled like paper and leather. 6 months later, my parents sold the family house at auction. After paying off the IRS, they had enough to buy a small apartment. My mother hasn't contacted me, and my father sends me a card every month. Luna is back to her silent reading hours, and every Saturday, she sits in the oak reading chair in the new library wing named after her, tracing the book plate before she starts to read. Setting boundaries with the people who raised you doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you finally learn how to protect the people they tried to take from you. This is my story. If it reminds you that quiet protection can be more powerful than any argument, share it with someone you love.